The average American over 65 spends $600 a year on pain relief. But for 100 years, American pharmacies stocked a plant that grows for free in a ditch, one so effective it replaced morphine in the Civil War. By the end of this video, you will know why it was erased from history and how to grow it yourself. In 1792, a young Philadelphia physician made a decision that could have killed him. His name was John Redmond Cox, 19 years old, son of a loyalist trader who fled to England after the Revolution. Raised by his grandfather, one of Philadelphia's most respected doctors. Trained under Benjamin Rush, signer of the Declaration of Independence. He came back to America with a single mission. America was importing all of its opium from Turkey and India. Every drop of pain relief in this country depended on foreign supply chains that could be cut at any moment. Cox wanted a painkiller that grew free on American soil and could never be embargoed. So he walked into his own garden and started cutting lettuce stems. Milky white sap bled out. He collected it, dried it, and took it himself. He survived. More than that, he recorded that the effects felt similar to opium, but without what opium left behind: no dependency, no spiraling dose, no withdrawal when the supply ran dry. He published his findings through Benjamin Franklin's own scientific society. He wrote to Thomas Jefferson about it. He became a professor at Penn. And for nearly 100 years after that paper, what he found in his garden was standard American pharmacy. Wild lettuce grows 6 feet tall in its second year. The stem is hollow. The leaves are jagged with soft bristles running down the center vein. Sometimes the stem flushes purple. The flowers are small and yellow and barely noticeable, which is fitting for a plant that does most of its work quietly. Cut the stem anywhere and white sap bleeds out immediately. That sap is called lactucarium. When dried, it hardens into a brown resin. Ancient physicians called it lettuce opium because of what it could do. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever found, described a plant they called lettuce of the gods in 1550 years before the Common Era. Greek physician Dioscorides documented it in 77 of the Common Era. Roman physicians used it for insomnia, battlefield wounds, and coughs. For 2,000 years, across multiple civilizations with no contact with each other, this plant was independently identified as medicine. In America, by 1898, the United States Pharmacopeia listed wild lettuce alongside morphine and aspirin, not as a folk remedy, not as a supplement, as a standardized, tested, approved drug with 3 official preparations: raw lactucarium, tincture of lactucarium, and syrup of lactucarium. Pharmacists stocked it, physicians prescribed it, patients trusted it. It was as legitimate as aspirin. Then, in 1861, the American Civil War created an unplanned clinical trial on a scale nobody had ever seen. Confederate Surgeon General Samuel Preston Moore faced a catastrophe. The Union blockade had cut off morphine entirely. Surgeons were amputating limbs without anesthesia. Soldiers died screaming on operating tables. Moore assigned a South Carolina physician and botanist a single mission: catalog every wild plant in the South that could replace what the blockade had taken. The result was a 600-page field manual published by order of the Confederate Surgeon General in 1863. Wild lettuce was in it, documented, cataloged, prescribed for a medical system cut off from its supply chain. The National Museum of Civil War Medicine confirms it. Confederate surgeons used wild lettuce as part of their substitute pharmacy, not because they wanted to, because nothing else existed. And here is what the history books do not tell you. The soldiers who received botanical treatments did not develop opioid dependency. There was no wild lettuce crisis after the Civil War. No veterans addicted to what grew along southern riverbanks. The addiction epidemic came from the soldiers who received morphine through the hypodermic needle, introduced widely by the 1870s. By 1895, Historians estimate 1 in 200 Americans was addicted to opiates. The alternative that grew wild left no such wreckage behind. 2,000. That is how many years wild lettuce had been documented as medicine before a single researcher named Fulton declared it all a superstition in 1944. Here is what Fulton wrote. Modern medicine considers its sleep-producing qualities a superstition and its therapeutic action doubtful or nil. Here is what Fulton did not tell you. The researchers who came immediately before him had already identified the active compounds. They named them lactucin and lactucopicrin. They confirmed these compounds had specific sedative and central nervous system activity in animals. Their finding was that commercial lactucarium preparations had degraded. The compounds are chemically unstable and light-sensitive. Products sitting on pharmacy shelves had lost their active ingredients. Fulton did not test fresh, wild lettuce. He tested old commercial preparations. Then he declared the entire plant useless. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. The full identity of Fulton cannot be verified today. No first name, no institutional affiliation, no publication venue appears in any traceable citation. The man who erased 100 years of botanical medicine from the American Pharmacopeia is bibliographically a ghost. The same year Fulton published that study, synthetic analgesics were flooding the American market. The first fully synthetic opioid had been developed in Germany in 1939. The pharmaceutical industry was pivoting from plants to patents. A painkiller that grew wild and could not be owned was not compatible with the system being built. Wild lettuce fell from the pharmacopeia. Doctors stopped prescribing it. Pharmacies stopped stocking it. A generation of physicians trained after 1950 never learned it existed. For decades, that was the end of the story. Then, science came back. In 2006, researchers at the Institute of Pharmacology at the Polish Academy of Sciences published a study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. They isolated lactucin and lactucopicrin, the same active compounds identified in 1939, and tested them for pain relief. The results were specific and measurable. At 15 milligrams per kilogram, the compounds produced pain relief that matched ibuprofen at 30 milligrams per kilogram. Per milligram, roughly twice the analgesic effect of ibuprofen in those models. Now here is what the pharmaceutical industry will never fund a study to confirm. These compounds do not bind opioid receptors. They do not create the dependency pathway that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. That alone separates wild lettuce from everything in the pain management aisle at your pharmacy. What it does instead operates on 3 separate mechanisms. The first is the one that will surprise you most. Think of your nervous system like a room with a volume knob. Prescription anxiety medications and sleep aids work by turning that knob down, targeting a specific receptor family called GABA-A. Wild lettuce hits the same receptor family, not through a synthetic compound cooked in a lab, through lactucin, a compound that costs $3 as seed. Korean researchers confirmed 80% binding affinity to that receptor. The same doorway, a completely different key. The second mechanism works from the inside out. Your body already produces its own natural painkillers. They are called enkephalins. The problem is your body also produces an enzyme that breaks them down almost immediately. Wild lettuce inhibits that enzyme. It does not flood your system with something foreign. It protects what your body already makes and lets it do its job longer. The third was confirmed just last year in the Journal of Medicinal Chemistry, a previously unknown anti-inflammatory pathway. Researchers are still mapping what it means. Now search wild lettuce on PubMed. You will find a fraction of the studies that exist for opioid pain management. That gap is not about how well the plant works. It is about who pays for the research. You cannot patent a plant that grows in a ditch. There is no financial engine to fund the science. The most active research happening right now is in Korea, Poland, and Iran. Not here. Not funded by the companies that profit from selling you a substitute. 24.3% of American adults live with chronic pain right now. That is 63 million people. This number is rising. The United States pain management drug market is valued at over $32 billion this year. The opioid crisis costs $1.5 trillion annually in economic damage, according to the Joint Economic Committee of the United States Senate. Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family settled for $7.4 billion. Johnson & Johnson paid $5 billion. CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart combined paid $13 billion. Over $50 billion in settlements for a crisis created while wild lettuce sat in the ditches outside their distribution centers the entire time. If that number made you feel something, hit the like button right now, because most people watching this have never been told any of it. The average American household over 65 spends between $40 and $70 a month managing chronic pain. That is up to $840 a year. Every year. On refills, on copays, on over-the-counter bottles that run out. A packet of wild lettuce seeds costs $3 to $8. The plant self-seeds every year after the first. Your total investment for a permanent supply of fresh lactucarium is 1 afternoon of planting and 1 season of patience. This is not a gardening decision. It is a financial one. And unlike a prescription, it does not expire. If you are watching this and realizing that what grew free in American pharmacies for 100 years is still growing free in American ditches today, subscribe to Purposeful Roots right now. Every week on this channel, we cover the plants the industry was built to make you forget. You are going to want the next one. Here is exactly how to grow it, identify it, and use it. Wild lettuce is a biennial. In the first year, it grows as a low rosette of deeply lobed leaves close to the ground. In the second year, the flowering stalk shoots up, sometimes reaching 6 feet, and that is when you harvest. To identify it in the wild, cut the stem. Milky white sap flows immediately. Then confirm 3 things. Soft bristles on the midrib of the leaf underside, not hard prickles. A stem that sometimes shows purple flushing. And seeds that are dark, almost black. One critical note. True Lactuca virosa, the most potent species, is actually rare in American wild populations. What grows most commonly along roadsides is Lactuca cereola, prickly lettuce, which also contains lactucarium, but at lower concentration. If you want reliable potency, grow it from seed rather than foraging. Seed is available online for $3 to $8. Sow in early spring when soil temperature is above 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Scatter seeds on the surface and press gently. Do not bury them. They need light to germinate. Germination takes 10 to 20 days. Plant in full sun, well-drained soil, 12 inches apart. The plant self-seeds reliably. One planting becomes a permanent population. Harvest timing is everything. Cut in the second year, just before the flowers fully open. Typically June through August. Cut on a hot, dry day when sap flow is highest. Here is why timing matters so much. The active compounds lactucin and lactucopicrin are light-sensitive and chemically unstable. This is precisely why 19th century commercial preparations had degraded by the time researchers tested them. Fulton tested a spoiled product, not the plant. Fresh material is what works. The traditional extraction method requires no equipment at all. Score the flowering stalk with a knife. Milky sap beads at the wound immediately. Collect it in a small glass or ceramic cup. Return the next day. Slice a thin section off the dried surface. Collect more sap. Repeat daily for several weeks until the plant is exhausted. The collected latex dries naturally into a brown resin. Store in airtight glass in a cool, dark location and use within a few months for best potency. For a tincture, fill a mason jar 3/4 full with freshly chopped leaves and stems. Cover with 80 proof or higher vodka. Seal it. Store for 4 to 8 weeks in a dark place, shaking regularly. Strain and bottle. The traditional dose from the 1898 pharmacist reference was 30 to 60 drops. For tea, steep 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried leaves in a covered cup of boiling water for 10 to 15 minutes. The bitterness is significant. Honey helps. One important note: all clinical research on wild lettuce uses isolated concentrated compounds, not whole plant preparations. Whole plant tea and tincture are traditional and well documented as safe across centuries of use. But if you are currently managing pain with prescription medication, speak with your doctor before making any changes. Wild lettuce is not a replacement for emergency medical care. John Redmond Cox tested this plant on his own body in 1792. He published his findings through Benjamin Franklin's Scientific Society. He wrote to Thomas Jefferson about it. He spent a career trying to give Americans a painkiller they could grow themselves, one they could never be cut off from, one that would not enslave them to a dose that grew larger every year. He failed, not because the plant failed, because the system that replaced him was built on a different model, a model that required purchase, that required prescription, that required renewal, that required dependency, whether biological or financial, to function. Wild lettuce does not fit that model. It never did. It still does not. The pharmaceutical industry has paid out over $50 billion in opioid settlements. The crisis those settlements represent has reshaped the lives of millions of American families. Families that spent decades trusting a system that had already buried the alternative. The alternative is still growing. In ditches along highways, along riverbanks, in disturbed soil at field edges where nobody thinks to look. It does not need a prescription pad. It does not need a marketing budget or a lobbying firm or an advertisement asking you to talk to your doctor. It just grows. The same way it grew when John Cox cut its stem in a Philadelphia garden in 1792. The same way it grew in the Confederate South when morphine had run out and surgeons needed something, anything, that could quiet a soldier enough to close his eyes. $3, one planting, one decision. That is the entire distance between you and the plant that replaced morphine in American pharmacies for 100 years before a ghost named Fulton called it a superstition, and the industry moved on. The knowledge is here. The seed is available. What happens next is yours. If this opened something for you, subscribe to Purposeful Roots.
Every week on this channel, we cover the plants, the seed industry, the supplement industry, and the agrochemical industry spent decades trying to bury. The next one will surprise you more than this one did.